So here we are with week 4 of your 12-week course, The English Way. And how have you been getting on these past 3 weeks? Have you been practicing? I see you nodding your head, but have you really been practicing? I mean, have you worked at getting lots of breath in, putting your hands on your rib cage and letting it expand outwards and upwards as you take in plenty of air so you can push out the words on a cushion of air? How are you getting on with that? That needs practice, a lot of practice. And remember, when you're doing breathing exercises or other exercises, you really must try to be standing up, because when you sit down, everything collapses and you can't do it properly. And what about articulation? Can you do ma me mi, na ne ni? Can you do all those? Ma na la, me ne le, mi ni li? Can you do them at that speed yet, with the control of the breath that you've been using? So, breath control and articulation, and the key words, of course. R-A-E-O-U, R-A-E-O-U, use the mouth, use the tongue. R-A-E-O-U, the key words that come in key places in important English sounds. You know, in England, we're devoted to our old buildings, particularly buildings of great cultural importance like the Royal Albert Hall. It's completely circular, it seats over 5,000 people, and it was commissioned and inaugurated by Queen Victoria in 1871. And she insisted that it should be called the Royal Albert Hall in memory of her dear husband who died 10 years earlier, Albert, and to whom she was absolutely devoted. And as we move inside, we can see Nicola Bernadetti playing Bruch's violin concerto. Have you ever thought that you're a bit like a musical instrument yourself? After all, if you look at a violin, it's got a neck, a waist, a body, and we've got a neck, a waist, and a body. But the way that a violin produces beautiful sound is that somebody bows the strings and the strings vibrate, and then the sound goes down into the body of the violin where it's amplified and comes out as a beautiful sound. What have you got? You've got a mouth that can issue forth maybe beautiful sounds, I hope, but only if we power it, not by bowing the strings, but by vibrating the vocal cords with air that you've taken into the lungs. And that's why you need to get really on top of this breathing thing, because if you don't have enough breath in reserve, then you can't vibrate the chords properly, open the mouth, and get right to the end of a phrase or sentence. Let's stay with the Albert Hall for a minute. When you saw Nicola Bernadetti playing just now, that was at a very special occasion. Every year, the Royal Albert Hall hosts the Proms, and the Proms stands for promenade. Now, what happens is they get more than 5,000 people in once a year, and the whole of the floor of the auditorium, all the seats are removed, and people can stand, and they're called promenaders. That's the cheapest seat, and you can get it on the day by queuing up for days and getting a place to stand as a promenader. So that was Nicola Bernadetti playing Bruch's violin concerto at a prom. And here, if we stay with the Proms, are the 5,000 or more people at a prom singing Land of Hope and Glory. Now, Land of Hope and Glory is like a national anthem, but it isn't a national anthem, but it's a very patriotic song. And you know, as I watch this and hear them sing, it almost brings a tear to the eye, because I am proud to be English, and I'm particularly proud when I hear all those wonderful people raising their voices right to the ceiling, right to the clouds, singing Land of Hope and Glory. Of course, English music and singing is very different to Indian music and singing. In English singing, you can only do a note, a half note, nothing else. So you can do that's a note, that's one note up, or a semi-note, ah, ah. Can you hear that? That's as much as we do. Whereas in Indian music, it's quite different. And as far as I know, singers and musicians are allowed to improvise if they want. Here's Ravi Shankar showing us just how you do it. All right, so there is a difference between English and Indian music. For a start, English music is very disciplined. It's written down. It appears on a sheet of paper called manuscript paper. It has 5 lines, and each of these lines represents a note, and the spaces in between represent a note. And then there are marks to show the length and breadth and weight of that particular note, how long it's to play for. So it's quite disciplined. But once you get it, it's not so disciplined to use it. I've been using that method since I was a tiny child, and I don't find it difficult. Now, in Indian music, it's a whole different ball game, isn't it? Because you can play with it, you can feel the emotion, you can go with the feeling, go with the emotion. That's the difference. And of course, you can have quarter tones. Ah, ah, that's a quarter tone, not ah. A lot of difference. Now, that's what makes Indian music sound so very different from English music. And yet, you know, very early on in this course, we talked about what were the vocal influences on your speech when you start to speak English. And we said that from early childhood, you were programmed in your vocal memory, programmed by the sounds and the speech and the accent that you heard around you. That's how you learned to speak. And that program is still in there. And of course, it's influenced by the music you hear. Now, this is what we call a soliloquy. A soliloquy, you can hear it's solo. It's when an actor in a play turns to the audience and turns and speaks directly to them. These are his thoughts that he expresses to the audience when he can't decide what to do next. And here's a famous actor showing it.
To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end
So
them...
could you hear the rhythm there? To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. And something that we try to avoid in the English language, whether it's in a play, in a movie, or in life, we try to avoid going down at the end of the sentence. If I say to you, "Hello, how are you doing today?" It's very depressing, isn't it? Sounds like I'm not at all interested in how you're doing. If I say, "Hello, how are you doing today?" It sounds happy, energetic, and that I really care how you are. So do remember that as well. Try not to fall off at the end of the sentence. Now, a lot of people do fall off at the end of a sentence, and the reason they fall off at the end of the sentence is because they run out of breath. Now, on my phone, people leave messages, and sometimes they're asking me to call them back. So I get this message that says, "Hello, Valentine, how are you doing? Could you call me back on 0700?" And it all dribbles away. And then I've got to play the message over and over to try to get the number they've left me, because they ran out of breath before they could really plug that number so I would ring it. So please try not to fall off at the end of a sentence, which means remembering to get plenty of breath in and support the words as they come out on a cushion of air. Now, I'm going to mark up this little speech, or this part of the speech that we've just heard, and I want you to see where the stresses are and what the key sounds are. to be, there's an E, or not to be, there's another E. That, and that could be an R, that is the question. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether, there's an R, 'tis nobler, there's an O. To suffer, there's an R. The slings, there's an E. And arrows, there's an O. Of outrageous, there's an A. Fortune, or to take arms, there's a nice R. Against a sea, there's a nice E. Of troubles, and by opposing, there's an O. And them. I want you to practice that speech and get it really good, and get the iambic pentameter, get that English rhythm, because then when you speak to someone in English, you can speak to them with a typical English rhythm. And remember what we said about the music as well. Try and get the English music. I happen to love Indian music, but it goes tinky-donky, up and down, and it goes wherever you want it to go to. In England, it's beat, 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 didum, 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 land of hope and glory. To be or not to be, that is the question. Off you go now, and of course the assignment this week is what? To listen to English music, to listen to Indian music, see the difference. It's all here on the video for you to study. And remember not to fall off at the end of a sentence. And by the way, don't forget the previous weeks that we've worked. So now you've got 4 weeks of material to study and get it right into your brain until when you speak English, you really sound English.